Can you imagine the gut punch of realizing your own sister, the one you've always protected, thought your wheelchair was an embarrassment? She literally hid me in a back room at her wedding, then panicked when I dared to fight back. Oh, honey, did I fight back? I've been in this wheelchair since I was 12. A car accident just after my sister Camille's high school graduation. I saw the headlights. I pushed her down. I protected her. She walked away without a scratch. I never did. For the next 15 years, I poured every ounce of myself into building my accounting firm. From a hospital bed, then from this chair. Now, I manage portfolios for professional athletes. Camille. She became a physical therapist, makes decent money, nothing spectacular. Despite everything, we stayed close. I paid off her student loans, no questions asked. When our parents passed, I handled all the funeral costs so she could grieve. Never asked for thanks, never needed it. She was my little sister. That's just what you do, right? Last year, Camille got engaged to Preston. He's an event planner, comes from old money, and darling, he is obsessed with appearances. The first time he met me, he actually asked Camille if I could transfer to a regular chair for photos, so my wheelchair wouldn't be distracting. Can you believe that? I should have known then, but Camille apologized for him. Said he didn't mean it that way, just wanted perfect photos. I stupidly let it slide. 8 months before the wedding, Camille came to me in a total panic. They were way over budget. Preston wanted the country club, the 10-piece band, the 7-course meal, the premium open bar. His parents, who promised to pay, had backed out after some bad investments. Invitations were already sent. Could I help? Just a loan? She'd pay me back, she swore. I wrote a check for $75,000 that day. Told her it wasn't a loan. It was my wedding gift. She cried, called me the best sibling ever. Preston never thanked me directly, but he suddenly started being nicer. Included me in wedding planning, even asked my opinion on centerpieces. I actually thought we were finally connecting. Fool. 3 weeks before the wedding, my invitation arrived. Table 19, my stomach dropped. I figured it had to be a mistake. I called Camille, trying to laugh it off. Ha ha! Funny typo, right? She went silent. Said Preston had done the seating chart. Table 1 was the wedding party. Tables 2-8, his family. 9-15, her college friends. 16 to 18, mutual friends. And table 19, it was in the auxiliary room, through a separate door next to the service entrance, for overflow guests and anyone with special needs. She actually said special needs. My blood ran cold. Are you serious? I asked. She rattled off some nonsense about Preston not wanting my wheelchair blocking the aisle for photos, and how the auxiliary room was more accessible anyway, closer to the bathroom. As if she was doing me a favor. I pressed her. Who else is at table 19, Camille? Camille. She mumbled about a former co-worker Preston didn't like, some random plus ones, and our cousin with autism, who might make noise during the ceremony. The reject table, hidden away so Preston could have his perfect wedding photos. I asked her point blank, does Preston know I paid for this wedding? Her answer, that's not relevant. He doesn't need to know. It might make him feel obligated to change things. My voice was flat when I said, okay. No argument, no fight, just, I understand, and I hung up. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful Saturday in June. I wore the outfit Preston had approved, a shade of blue that would make me blend in but not stand out. I arrived early, though no one asked. During the ceremony, I sat in the back row. Preston had someone save a seat for appearances, but told me the back was easier for my chair. I watched my sister marry a man who was embarrassed by my existence. The reception started. I wheeled to the auxiliary room. Table 19 was exactly what I expected. Shoved in a corner, plastic tablecloth instead of linen, no centerpiece, folding chairs, and a crackling speaker that barely carried the music from the main room. My table mates, Camille's old roommate, some random plus one glued to their phone, and our delightful cousin, who just looked confused why we were separated. I stayed for exactly 1 hour, long enough to be polite. Then I left, and I made some calls. Monday morning, the country club called Camille. Problem with the payment. The check had been canceled. All of it. The venue wanted their money immediately, or they'd file charges. Then the band called. Then the caterer, the florist, the photographer. Every single vendor. $75,000 worth of canceled checks. Camille called me in a panic. I didn't answer. She drove to my office. Security wouldn't let her up. She waited for 6 hours in the lobby. Finally, I came down. She was frantic, asking what happened to the checks. I explained calmly that I'd canceled them all. Her face went completely white. Not pale. White. Like every drop of blood just drained straight out. Her mouth opened and closed, no sound. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked on every other word. Vendors were calling her. The country club manager used words like fraud and theft of services. The band leader was threatening to sue. The photographer filed a complaint. The florist was talking small claims court. She was running her hands through her hair, pulling at it, making it stand up in weird directions. People in the lobby were staring. I didn't care. My voice was level. Those are your problems to solve, Camille, not mine. I gave you a gift. When you decided to humiliate me by hiding me away like I was something shameful, I took that gift back. Simple as that. She grabbed the arms of my wheelchair, leaned down close to my face, and begged me to reconsider. Said Preston didn't mean anything by the seating chart. He was just stressed. They could fix this. They'd move me to a better table at the next family event. They'd make it right. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked directly, "Do you honestly think it's acceptable to take $75,000 from someone, then hide them in a separate room through the service entrance, treating them like an embarrassment, like something to be managed and tucked away?" She couldn't meet my eyes, stared at the floor, mumbled about Preston's stress, his parents backing out. He wasn't thinking clearly. I waited. She kept talking, circular arguments, excuses. Everything came back to Preston's stress, Preston's vision, Preston's family expectations. Not once did she say she was wrong. Not once did she acknowledge my hurt. After about 20 minutes, security approached. Johnny, the guard I knew, looked uncomfortable. Asked if everything was okay. Camille straightened up, said we were fine, just family discussion. But she didn't leave. Kept trying to convince me. Offered to pay me back. Offered to have Preston apologize. Offered everything except actually understanding why I was angry. An hour passed. Then another. Johnny came back twice more. The third time, he had his supervisor. They asked Camille to leave. She refused. Said she wasn't going anywhere until I agreed to fix this. The supervisor calmly explained this was private property and I was asking her to go. Camille looked at me like I was a stranger, like she couldn't believe I was doing this to her. The supervisor put a hand on her shoulder, firm but not rough, and guided her toward the exit. Camille kept looking back at me, her eyes red. I rolled to the elevator and went up to my office. From my 7th-floor window, I could see the parking lot. Camille's car was still there. She sat in the driver's seat, head in her hands, for almost an hour. Just sat there, not moving. I watched her, and for a terrifying moment, I felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt relieved. And guilty about feeling relieved, and angry that I felt guilty. My assistant, Elise, knocked on my doorframe, asking if I was okay. I told her the truth, guilty, relieved, angry all at once, like my emotions couldn't figure out what they were supposed to be doing. She came in and sat down. Said it was completely normal. Said I'd set a boundary, and Camille was struggling to accept it. That didn't make me wrong, just made it hard. We sat there for a while. She didn't try to fix anything, just sat with me. I appreciated that more than she knew. The next morning, my office line rang at 8:30. Unknown number. I picked up anyway. Preston's voice hit me like a physical blow. Screaming. Literally screaming. I was ruining their lives, destroying their future. How dare I cancel checks after the wedding? He was going to sue me. His family's lawyers were already looking into it. I was a bitter, jealous person who couldn't stand to see other people happy. I held the phone away from my ear, counted to 30. Then I hung up. Blocked the number. Blocked Camille's cell, their home number. Every number I had for them on my work phone. My personal cell was already done. Around 10, Sterling, my attorney, called. We'd worked together for years. He got straight to the point. The country club had contacted him. He'd reviewed everything. I was legally clear. The check was a gift, not a contract. I'd canceled it before services were fully rendered. No legal obligation to pay. Camille and Preston were now liable for the full amount to all vendors. If they couldn't pay, vendors could sue, send them to collections, ruin their credit. He said it matter-of-factly, no judgment, just the legal reality. That twist in my stomach again. The guilt. But I reminded myself I didn't create this. They did. When they decided my wheelchair was too ugly for their perfect photos. when they stuck me in that auxiliary room with the plastic tablecloths and folding chairs. When they took my money and treated me like garbage. Sterling asked if I wanted him to prepare for any potential legal action. Yes, I said. Document everything. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. Different number. I answered. A man's voice, professional, polite, asked for me by name. Rhett Champion, the country club manager. He sounded genuinely confused, concerned. Wondered if there'd been some mistake. Mentioned Camille had seemed like such a nice young woman. Very apologetic about the situation, I took a breath. Explained very calmly that there was no mistake. I had funded the wedding as a gift. I revoked that gift after being treated poorly. Rhett went quiet for a moment. Then he said he understood. Wished me well. Thanked me for being direct. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my computer screen, thinking about Camille in her car, Preston screaming, the vendors about to go after them for $75,000 they didn't have, and that plastic tablecloth, those folding chairs, that crackling speaker. I didn't feel guilty anymore. Over the next 3 days, my phone lit up constantly with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Camille was trying every trick in the book to get around my blocks. The first batch, Tuesday morning, long paragraphs about how sorry she was, how she never meant to hurt me, how we could work this out if I just talked to her. By Tuesday afternoon, the tone shifted. Shorter messages, asking why I was being so stubborn, reminding me family is supposed to forgive, pointing out Preston was just trying to make their day perfect. Wednesday brought angry texts, accusations that I was ruining their lives over nothing, being petty and vindictive, that canceling checks after the wedding was stealing. Thursday morning, she switched back to desperate, begging me to reconsider, saying vendors were threatening to sue, asking if I really wanted to destroy her credit and future over a seating chart. Not once did any message actually say what she did was wrong. Not once did she acknowledge that hiding me away might have hurt me. Every text was about her problems, her stress, her marriage, her money. I saved every single one. Elise came into my office Thursday afternoon with 2 coffees and a serious expression. We need to talk about documentation, she said, setting her cup on my desk. If this turns into an actual legal situation, you'll want records of everything. She pulled out a notebook, listed all the texts, Preston's calls, the original invitation showing table 19, emails about planning, bank records. I told her I had most of it. I'd compile a file. She nodded. Then she mentioned her sister, Olivia, had photographed the wedding. Olivia had been pretty upset about the auxiliary room and had taken photos of table 19 specifically because she thought it was wrong. If I wanted visual proof, yes, I said. Yes, I do. Visual proof felt important somehow. A week after the wedding, my phone rang with a number I actually recognized. My cousin, who'd been stuck at table 19 with me. I answered, and he started talking immediately. He wanted to thank me. The whole wedding had made him feel terrible, he said. Separated from everyone, sitting in that side room with cheap decorations, watching people go past to the real reception, he'd felt humiliated. He was glad, he said, when he heard what I'd done. Glad someone finally stood up to how Preston treats people he thinks are beneath him. His voice got tight. I thanked him for calling, told him he deserved better than that table too. After we hung up, I thought about how many people Preston had made feel small. Then my parents' old friends started calling. First the Caldwells, who'd known Mom since college, then the Harrises, our former neighbors, then 3 more couples. All had heard rumors about Camille's wedding payments. They wanted to know what happened. I gave each of them the same simple explanation. I'd paid for the wedding as a gift. I was seated away from family in a separate room despite funding the event. I canceled the payment after being treated that way. Most reacted with immediate shock. Mrs. Caldwell actually gasped. Mr. Harris said my parents would have been furious. Every conversation ended with them saying I'd done the right thing. And Camille should be ashamed. Word was spreading through their circle fast. Elise told me Friday that Camille had called her office trying to reach me. Elise said I was unavailable, but Camille left a message. Preston's parents had offered to cover part of the vendor payments, $20,000. That left Camille and Preston on the hook for $55,000 they didn't have. She was asking if I'd reconsider, if we could work out a payment plan. Anything to avoid lawsuits. Elise told her she'd pass the message along but made no promises. She looked at me across her desk. What do you want me to say if she calls back? I said, tell her I'm not available. Elise nodded, made a note. 2 weeks after the wedding, a thick envelope arrived. A mediation firm. Inside, a formal letter on expensive letterhead requesting my presence to resolve this family dispute amicably. It laid out the situation in careful, neutral language: disagreement over wedding expenses, family relationships under strain, opportunity to find common ground. I called Sterling immediately. He read it. "You have no legal obligation to attend," he said. "The canceled check is clean, but mediation might provide closure. Give everyone a chance to say their piece in a controlled environment." I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to be done with all of it, but another part wanted Camille to hear, face to face, exactly what she'd done. I told Sterling I'd do one session, under conditions, neutral location, and he attends with me. He'd contact the mediator. Sterling called back the next day. Conditions met. The session would be at the mediator's office downtown. Sterling would attend as my advisor, and the mediator confirmed who else would be there: Camille, Preston, and Preston's mother. 3 of them and 1 of me. Sterling heard the concern in my voice. He reminded me he'd be there, and the mediator was trained to keep things balanced. "Okay," I said. We scheduled it for the following Tuesday. The night before, I had dinner with Issa Schwartz, a professional soccer player whose investments I managed. We become friends. She knew the basic outline of what happened. Over pasta, she told me about cutting off her own toxic family 5 years ago. Her parents tried to control her career, take her money. When she set boundaries, they turned the whole extended family against her. "Hardest thing I ever did," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "Also the healthiest. Sometimes people who share your blood don't deserve access to your life." I asked if she ever regretted it. "No," she said, "not once." Tuesday morning, Sterling picked me up. The mediation firm was on the 3rd floor of a financial district building. We checked in, and the receptionist led us to a conference room. Mia, the mediator, was already there, a woman in her 50s with calm eyes. She explained the process. Everyone would speak. She'd facilitate. Keep it productive. Goal: understanding and resolution. 5 minutes later, Camille, Preston, and Preston's mother walked in. Camille's eyes were already red. Mia had barely finished her opening remarks when Camille started crying. Actual tears running down her face. She talked about how I destroyed their marriage before it even started. Cancelled honeymoon, financial stress, tearing them apart. Preston couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat, all because I decided to be vindictive over a seating arrangement. Her voice broke. Mia let her finish, then gently redirected. "Focus on the issues, not the outcomes." Camille wiped her eyes and glared at me. Preston finally spoke. Quiet, tired. He admitted the seating arrangement was wrong and hurtful. He should have stood up for me, should have insisted I sit with family. But then his tone shifted. Canceling the checks was a massive overreaction. It punished innocent vendors who'd done nothing wrong. The florist, the caterer, the band, they were just trying to run businesses, now threatening legal action against him and Camille. Was that really fair? I looked at him across the table. "You seem more concerned about vendors than your own wife's family," I said. "You took $75,000 from me, then hid me in a side room like I was too embarrassing to be seen. And now you want to talk about what's fair." Preston's mother leaned forward. "You're being vindictive and petty," she said, her voice rising, holding one small mistake over their heads, destroying their financial stability over a seating chart. "Young couples make mistakes. Family is supposed to forgive." Sterling calmly set down his pen. "Hiding the person who paid for your entire wedding in a separate room," he said, looking directly at her, "was not a small mistake. It was a deliberate choice that showed exactly how much they valued my client." Preston's mother's face went red, but she didn't respond. I took a deep breath and spoke directly to Camille. "This isn't about one seating chart, Camille. It's about 15 years of taking my help for granted, never acknowledging my sacrifices, treating my disability as an inconvenience to manage instead of just part of who I am." I reminded her paying off her student loans, no thank you card, handling our parents' funeral costs so she could grieve, and she acted like it was just what I was supposed to do, and then funding her wedding, only to be stuck in a side room with the people her husband didn't want to see. The room went completely silent. Even Preston stopped fidgeting. Mia wrote on her notepad. Camille started crying, not the angry tears from earlier, but quiet, shaking sobs. She said she never realized how much she'd hurt me. That she just got used to me, always being there to fix things. She took me for granted. She was sorry. It was the first thing she'd said that sounded genuinely sorry, not just scared about money. I felt something shift in my chest, but I didn't let it show. Preston looked at Camille crying, then turned to me. The wedding was supposed to be the perfect day, he said. I made it about myself by being difficult. You could have just been gracious and sat where you were told. Sterling raised his eyebrows and scribbled a note. Mia cleared her throat. What outcome are you looking for? She asked me. I said honestly that I wanted acknowledgement of the hurt they caused, assurance that I'd be treated with basic respect going forward, not as Camille's charity case sibling in the wheelchair, not as someone to hide away, just as a person who deserves the same consideration as anyone else. Preston scoffed. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I looked at him, knew exactly where he stood. Nothing I said was going to change his mind about me. Camille liked her face, said they'd pay me back the $75,000 over time if I'd help them settle with the vendors now. Maybe a payment plan. She looked desperate and hopeful. I told her that ship had sailed. They needed to handle their own financial obligations like adults. I wasn't going to rescue them from consequences they brought on themselves. Preston's mother jumped back in, offered another $15,000 if I'd contribute the remaining $40,000. Said it would keep this family together. I looked at her. Family should have been their priority before they stuck me at the reject table, before they took my money and treated me like I was too embarrassing to be seen. I wasn't interested in buying my way back into their good graces. The mediation went in circles for another hour. Camille cried, saying I was ruining their lives. Preston went back and forth. His mother tried to negotiate payment splits. Mia tried to redirect, but no one was listening. We were all just talking at each other. When Mia called time after 2 hours, everyone stood. Camille caught my arm as I wheeled toward the door. She leaned down and whispered, I'm sorry. I know I messed up badly. Her voice cracked. I looked up at her. Sorry doesn't pay vendor bills. Then I pulled my arm away and left with Sterling. Over the next week, I heard things through mutual friends. Camille and Preston took out a personal loan at a terrible interest rate, 22% or something crazy. They used it to pay off all the vendors. The florist had been threatening to sue. The photographer had filed in small claims court. They settled everything, but now they had this huge loan hanging over them. Part of me felt guilty. The part that spent 15 years taking care of Camille. But mostly, I felt like they were finally facing real consequences for their choices. For the first time, Camille was dealing with a problem I didn't fix for her. A few days later, I got an email from Olivia, Elise's sister, the wedding photographer's assistant. She sent me the photos she took of table 19. I opened the attachment. There it was. The plastic tablecloth instead of linen, the mismatched folding chairs, no centerpiece, the crackling speaker, the service entrance door in the background. My anger flared up all over again. I saved them to a folder on my computer. Reject table evidence. I wanted to remember why I made this decision every time I felt guilty. A month passed without hearing from Camille. I threw myself into work, trying not to think about the mess I'd created. Then one Tuesday evening, my doorman called. Camille was downstairs, asking to see me. My finger hovered over the button to say no, but avoiding her forever wasn't realistic. I told them to send her up. I wheeled to my door and waited. The elevator dinged. Camille walked toward me, looking worse than I'd ever seen her. Hair messy, dark circles under her eyes, clothes wrinkled. She stopped a few feet from my door. I backed up to let her inside. She came in slowly, sat on my couch without being invited. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the floor for a long moment. Then she spoke. Preston was furious with her, blamed her for not managing me better. Said she should have known I'd cause problems, handled me differently. Their marriage was falling apart from the stress. They fought constantly about money, and about me. The personal loan payments were killing them. Preston's parents weren't helping anymore. They were mad at both of them. I wheeled to the window and looked out at the city lights. Part of me felt bad for Camille. The bigger part of me felt like this was exactly what should happen. I turned back to face her. I told her I wasn't sorry for what I did, but I was sad about how our relationship got to this point. How we went from close siblings to this mess. Camille's voice cracked. She admitted she let Preston make decisions she knew were wrong. She was afraid of conflict with him, afraid he'd leave her if she stood up to him. So she went along with things that made her uncomfortable, including the seating chart. I asked her why she married someone she was afraid of. She didn't have an answer. We sat in silence. Then Camille told me something that made my stomach drop. Preston wanted to not invite me to the wedding at all. Said it would be easier if I just wasn't there. Camille fought him on that. Insisted I had to be invited. The auxiliary room was her compromise. She actually thought she was doing something good by making sure I was included at all. I stared at her. Do you really think sticking me in a separate room with the service entrance was a compromise? She looked miserable, didn't argue. I explained that compromise means everyone gives something up, not that one person gets completely humiliated while the other gets everything they want. That's not compromise, I said. That's just being cruel with extra steps. Camille put her head in her hands. We talked for over an hour. I brought up all the years I'd helped her, financially and emotionally. The student loans, the funeral costs, the wedding I funded. All the times I was there for her without asking for anything back. And she took it as her due, like it was just what I was supposed to do. She never recognized the sacrifice, never thanked me properly, never thought about what I was giving up. Camille said she understood now how one-sided things were. But I wasn't sure she really got it. Not fully. Understanding something in your head is different from feeling it in your gut. I told her I was willing to have a relationship with her eventually, but it needed to be different. It needed actual reciprocity and respect. She couldn't just take from me and expect me to be grateful she let me be part of her life. She asked what that would look like. Honestly, I said, I don't know yet. We'll have to figure it out together. But the old dynamic where I fixed all her problems is over. Permanently. She nodded slowly. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Could I ever forgive Preston? I looked at her directly. No, I told her. I don't think so. He showed me exactly who he is. Someone who cares more about appearances than people. Someone who took my money and treated me like garbage. Someone who would rather hide me away than acknowledge I exist. Camille looked devastated. But she didn't argue. She didn't defend him or make excuses. That told me something important. She was starting to see him more clearly, too. Before Camille left, she stood up and came over to my wheelchair. She crouched down, so we were at eye level. She thanked me. For the 15 years I spent protecting and supporting her. She said she should have said it 1,000 times before. It wasn't enough to fix everything, not even close. But it was a start. I watched her leave, feeling utterly exhausted. 2 weeks later, Elise came into my office with an annoyed expression. She'd heard through a mutual friend that Preston was telling people a different story. According to him, I was jealous of his relationship with Camille. That's why I sabotaged their wedding. I was a bitter, lonely person who couldn't stand to see my sister happy, so I destroyed her special day out of spite. I laughed when Elise told me that. Not a happy laugh, more like a tired one. Of course, Preston was rewriting history to make himself the victim. That's what people like him do. They can never accept their own actions have consequences. It's always someone else's fault. I told Elise not to worry. People who knew me would know the truth. People who believed Preston weren't worth my time anyway. I focused on my work. Threw myself into managing client portfolios, building my business. There was satisfaction in the company I'd built despite every obstacle life threw at me. I'd started from a hospital bed after the accident. Built everything from nothing while people told me it was impossible. Now, professional athletes trusted me with their financial futures. That meant something. Ela, my soccer player client, stopped by one afternoon with someone new, a sports medicine doctor. He was looking for a new accountant. Ela thought we'd be a good fit. We talked for an hour. By the end, he'd signed on. My business kept growing. My life kept moving forward, and I felt lighter than I had in years. 3 months passed without contact from Camille. My phone buzzed one Tuesday morning. Unknown number, but the area code was Camille's. Would you be willing to meet for coffee sometime? No pressure, just to talk. I stared at the message for a solid minute. Then I typed back. I'll meet you at the cafe 2 blocks from my office on Thursday afternoon. That way I could leave easily if things went badly. She sent back a simple, thank you. Thursday came. I wheeled into the cafe early, grabbed a table near the door with good exit access. Camille arrived exactly on time, looking thinner than I remembered. She ordered her coffee, sat down across from me. We made awkward small talk about work for 5 minutes before she got to the real reason. She and Preston were in marriage counseling. The financial stress from the wedding loan had created serious problems. They fought constantly. But what really bothered her was that Preston still didn't think he'd done anything wrong with the seating arrangement. He kept insisting he was just trying to make the day perfect, and I was too sensitive. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Camille, why are you staying with someone who can't even acknowledge hurting your sibling? She looked down at her hands, said she loved him. She hoped he would grow, learn to be more considerate. Maybe counseling would help. I told her that was her choice, and I respected it, but I wouldn't pretend to have a relationship with Preston. I couldn't sit through family dinners, holidays, acting like everything was fine when he still thought hiding me away was reasonable. Camille nodded slowly, said she understood. Then she asked if she and I could slowly rebuild our relationship, separate from her marriage. She wanted her sibling back in her life, even if Preston wasn't part of that. I thought about it, finally told her I was willing to try. But the old dynamic, where I fixed all her problems and bailed her out financially, was over permanently. She needed to understand that. Camille agreed immediately, said she knew she'd taken advantage of my generosity for years. She wanted to prove she could be a better sister. We started meeting for coffee every few weeks, kept the conversations light at first. Avoided Preston or the wedding. Camille never once asked me for money. That meant something. Showed she was trying to change. The meetings got easier. Felt less like walking on eggshells, more like actual sibling time. We could laugh about stupid things again. Remember good memories from before everything got complicated. It wasn't the same as before, but it was something. 6 months after the wedding, Camille called me on a Saturday morning. I was going through client files. She sounded nervous. Then she got to the point. She was pregnant. They'd found out the day before. A complicated mix of emotions hit me. Part of me was genuinely happy. She'd always wanted kids, but another part worried about what this meant for a slowly rebuilding relationship. I congratulated her, asked how she was feeling. Excited and terrified, she said. Then I made something clear. I told her I wouldn't be the family member who showed up for every event if Preston was hostile. I'd love my niece or nephew, but I had boundaries now. Camille said she understood completely. She was working on setting boundaries with Preston about her family relationships, trying to make him see he couldn't control who she spent time with or how she maintained connections with me. I could hear the strain in her voice, the exhaustion from constant conflict. Her marriage was probably a lot harder than she was letting on. Later that week, Elise came into my office with lunch. She looked at me. You seem lighter, happier than you've been in years. I stopped mid-bite. She was right. Setting boundaries, prioritizing my own dignity, had lifted a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. I wasn't constantly worried about managing Camille's problems, not walking on eggshells trying to keep everyone happy. Just living my own life, letting other people handle their own messes. That realization made me think about all the things I'd put off. I talked about taking a real vacation for years, but never did. Always some crisis needing my attention, some problem I had to solve. Not anymore. I booked a week at an accessible resort in Hawaii, left 2 weeks later. The resort was beautiful, actually designed for wheelchair users. Wide pathways, roll-in showers, beach access that worked. I spent the whole week reading paperbacks on the beach, swimming in the ocean, eating good food, not thinking about family drama or complicated relationships. Just existing in my own space, without anyone needing anything from me. It was the most relaxed I'd felt in over a decade. When I got home, a card waited in my mailbox, Camille's handwriting. Inside was an old photo I hadn't seen in years. Camille as a skinny teenager, me in my wheelchair, both laughing at something off camera. I couldn't remember what was so funny, but the joy on our faces was real. The note inside was short, but it hit me hard. It said, "Thank you for always protecting me, and I'm sorry I didn't protect you back." I sat in my living room holding that card for a long time. It didn't fix everything, didn't erase the hurt or magically repair our relationship. But it was real acknowledgement, real remorse. Not excuses, just honest recognition of what I'd given and what she'd failed to give back. I put the photo on my desk at work, where I can see it. A reminder that people could grow and change if they actually tried. That boundaries didn't mean giving up on relationships, just reshaping them into something healthier. The next day, I picked up my phone and called Camille. She answered on the second ring, sounding surprised. I told her the card meant a lot, and the photo brought back good memories. We talked for almost an hour about things we hadn't discussed in years. Remember when Dad tried to teach us both to fish? Mom's terrible meatloaf recipe? We laughed about the time Camille accidentally dyed all her white shirts pink, Small things that had nothing to do with the wedding or Preston or any of the hurt between us. Just two siblings remembering when things were simpler. Before I hung up, Camille said this felt like a new start. I agreed. Not the old relationship where I fixed everything, but something different, more equal. 3 weeks later, Camille texted me a photo. She'd had the baby that morning, a boy. They named him after our father. I stared at that tiny, wrinkled face. My nephew. Part of my family, even though his father would probably always resent me. I didn't call or visit the hospital. Gave them space. Instead, I contacted my financial advisor and set up a college fund. Put $50,000 in it. Sent Camille the account info with a note that made things very clear. This money was for my nephew's education, not for Camille and Preston, not for them to borrow against. For the baby only, Camille texted back a simple thank you. No arguments about the restrictions, no asking for more, just gratitude. 2 months passed before Camille asked if she could bring the baby to meet me. I suggested my office, neutral territory, and I could control the visit length. They arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Camille looked exhausted, new parent style. Dark circles, spit-up stains, but she was smiling when she carefully transferred the baby into my arms. My nephew was warm, solid, making little grunting noises. I studied his face looking for family resemblances. He had Camille's nose, what might become Mom's chin. I felt this rush of love for him, mixed with sadness that his father would probably always tell him I was the villain who ruined their wedding. That he'd grow up hearing Preston's version where I was petty and cruel instead of hurt and standing up for myself. I held him for 20 minutes while Camille talked about sleepless nights and learning to change diapers. When they left, I sat at my desk processing how complicated family had become. Over the next few months, Camille and I fell into a routine. She brought the baby to visit every other week or so, always just her, never Preston. I was fine with that, and I suspected she was too. The visits gave her a break from the tension at home and gave me time with my nephew without dealing with Preston's cold hostility. Camille would update me on the baby's milestones. She looked tired, but there was real happiness there too. Being a mother suited her even though I could tell the marriage part was hard. She never complained directly about Preston, but I could read between the lines, the way she'd pause. The careful phrasing to avoid negativity. I didn't push her. Just let her have these peaceful visits. The anniversary of our parents' death fell on a Sunday. Camille called that morning, asked if I wanted to visit their graves together. We hadn't been there at the same time since the funeral. I met her around noon. The weather was nice, and someone had left fresh flowers. We stood there quiet for a while. Then Camille started talking. She said Mom and Dad would have been so disappointed in how the wedding went down, how she let Preston treat me that way, how she took my help for granted for so many years. I agreed they would have been upset, but I also said they'd be proud that we were trying to fix things now instead of letting the relationship die. That we were both working on being better. Camille wiped her eyes and nodded. We stayed another hour, sharing memories. When we left, things felt lighter, like we'd included them in our healing. A few weeks later, Camille told me something that surprised me. Marriage counseling was actually helping her understand herself better. She'd always avoided conflict by letting others make decisions. Easier to go along with Preston than fight. But the counselor was helping her see that wasn't healthy. She needed to be more assertive about her own needs and values, especially regarding her family. She was working on setting boundaries with Preston about our relationship, making it clear he didn't get to control who she spent time with or if she brought her son to visit me. I could hear how hard that work was, how much energy it took to push back against his expectations. But she sounded determined in a way I hadn't heard before. I admitted to Camille that I'd been in therapy too. Started a couple months after the wedding to work through my anger. Not just about the reject table, but about years of being treated as less than because of my wheelchair. My therapist helped me see patterns I hadn't recognized, how I learned to make myself small and convenient to avoid being seen as difficult, how I convinced myself that demanding basic respect was selfish. But it wasn't, it was necessary. I needed to value myself enough to set boundaries when people treated me badly. Camille listened, said she was glad I was getting help, that I deserved to advocate for myself without feeling guilty. Almost a year after the wedding disaster, Camille asked if I'd come to her son's first birthday party. I hesitated. Is Preston okay with me being there? I asked. Camille said he'd accepted I was part of her life whether he liked it or not. She'd made it clear it wasn't negotiable. If he wanted her at family events, then I got to be there too. It wasn't the warm welcome I'd hoped for, but it was something. I told her I'd come. The party was at a local park. Warm weather, lots of families. I spotted Camille setting up decorations. Preston was arranging food. His face went tight when he saw me, but he came over, said hello in this perfectly polite voice that had zero warmth, asked how I was doing, commented on the weather, all very correct and civil and completely fake. I matched his energy, polite but distant. We weren't going to be friends, and we both knew it. But we could coexist. I spent most of the party playing with my nephew, talking to Camille's friends. Watched the baby smash his face into his birthday cake, frosting everywhere. He laughed, this pure, delighted sound. For those few hours, I could focus on loving my nephew and forget the complicated mess of adult relationships. After the cake, and when people started packing up, 3 of Camille's friends pulled me aside. They said they'd always thought the reject table thing was horrible, and they were glad I stood up for myself. One admitted she'd wanted to say something at the wedding, but didn't know how without making a scene. Another said Preston's reputation had taken a real hit when people found out what actually happened, that a lot of their mutual friends had been quietly judging him. I thanked them, but told them it wasn't about revenge or ruining Preston's reputation. It was about refusing to fund my own humiliation. They nodded, seemed to understand the difference. As I left, I felt like maybe things were moving in the right direction. Not perfect, not completely healed, but better. Camille and I were building something new, based on honesty and boundaries, instead of one-sided sacrifice. It was slower, harder, but it felt more real. Over the next few months, we found a rhythm. Lunch every other Tuesday at a sandwich place near my office. She brought photos of the baby. I told her about new clients or office lease problems. Normal sibling stuff. When I offered to set up another college fund for my nephew, Camille actually looked me in the eye and said thank you, instead of just accepting it like it was owed to her. That small shift meant everything. She started asking about my life, remembered my birthday, checked in when I mentioned a difficult client. The relationship felt balanced for the first time since the accident. I thought about the canceled check sometimes, usually late at night. Part of me still felt guilty about the chaos it caused and the vendors caught in the middle. But mostly, I felt relieved. The wedding disaster forced everyone to see me as a real person with feelings and limits, not just a bank account that solved problems. Camille's friends treated me differently now, with actual respect. Even my business contacts who heard the story seemed to view me as someone who stood up for themselves, rather than someone to pity. I didn't regret making that choice, even knowing the pain it caused. Sometimes you have to burn something down to build it better. Preston and I crossed paths at family events, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. We were polite and cold, like distant acquaintances. He'd ask about my business. I'd ask about his event planning work. We never talked about the wedding, the money, or the reject table. Camille managed both relationships by keeping them completely separate, which worked fine for me. She brought my nephew to visit me alone. I sent birthday gifts and called to check in. Her son would grow up knowing there was someone in the family who used a wheelchair and didn't take disrespect from anyone, which felt important. Camille told me once that explaining to Preston that I was part of her life, whether he liked it or not, involved serious fighting. But she held firm. That showed growth. 2 years after the wedding, my business had grown by 40%. I hired 2 new associates, moved into a bigger, better office. I took vacations without feeling guilty, set boundaries with clients, built a life where my wheelchair was just part of who I was, not something to apologize for or hide. Camille texted one Saturday morning asking to grab coffee. I met her at our usual place. We talked about her son starting to walk, my plans to expand into sports medicine accounting. Then Camille put down her coffee cup and said she was proud of me for standing up for myself, even when it was hard. I looked at her. I could tell she actually meant it this time. Not the empty words from before the wedding, but real understanding of what it cost me to demand respect. I told her I was proud of her too, for learning to set boundaries and be a better sister. We sat there for a while drinking our coffee, watching people walk by. So, tell me, if you were in my wheelchair at that reject table, what would you have done? Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and your own self-respect? I really want to know what you think.